So I'm in the storytelling mode. I actually have hours and hours of stories from my beginnings to the later years before Amen scattered the family. I I recorded them. They're not very good recordings quality wise, but I kept them as I got inspired by the Lord to do it, and and I've told these stories many times, so they're in there. Mexico with Jacob. I already started telling a little bit about it, and so I'm inspired. You know, we ended up in jail in Mexico. We took freight trains down into Mexico. I got an infection in my ear, almost took me out. Then I crunched the heel of my foot. I could barely walk. I'm walking around Mexico with Jake. At this point, we're in Torreon, and I can barely walk a block or two at a time. We got congregations around us. I mean, there's so many things that happened just leading up to getting into the jail. We worked our way down into San Blas, Mexico. It's either, I think it's slightly south of Mazatlan, if I remember right. Because I remember being in Mazatlan, so we had to go through Mazatlan to get to San Blas. And San Blas is a small tourist town. Mazatlan is a large tourist town similar to Acapulco, but north of Acapulco. And we were just entering into the beginnings of the jungle. And Jacob, you know, he'd been down there already, spoke fluent Spanish, really loved the whole culture. And it was a blast to go down with him because, you know, he's fluent. And we were locked in together. And he'd be rapping to the people. I was right inside of him. You know, one heart, one mind. And he would feel me. If I drifted a little bit, he'd turn around and say, well, you know, where'd you go? And congregations, everywhere we went. And people gave whatever we had need of and asked in the name of Jesus Christ. I mean, people gave. And they really, I mean, you could see it in them, the respect for Americans, giving up everything, you know, and walking, following Jesus Christ. Yeah, you could see it. More so than up here. Yeah, less offended by us living on the streets non-materialistically. Oh, yeah. But anyways, you got down into San Blas. We met an American there telling him our story. And shortly afterwards, somebody gave us a bag of weed. And right after we get the bag of weed, and it might have been part of a setup, because we were, you know, in those days, we were smoking marijuana. And we weren't, Jacob and I hadn't been, I mean, it just didn't come around. And we weren't out asking for it. But this came in. Shortly thereafter, we have an immigration officer arrest us and find the marijuana on us, take us to a Federales, a building, and we ended up in front of an immigration officer. He pulled out the marijuana, and Jacob explained to him how the Lord had given it to us, and there wasn't anything wrong with it, and that everybody really knows that. You know, it isn't any worse than drinking a glass of wine. So he ended up putting it in his drawer and didn't ever charge us with it. But they did charge us with illegally entering Mexico. We were wetbacks in Mexico. And so they put us in their jail. And when we got in there, I mean, we sitting down on our bedrolls looking at this jail. It had an open courtyard, had a papaya tree, had pepper plants growing there, had an outside shower, and had two cells, one larger one and one smaller one, which was the drunk tank. We're sitting there, we got all our gear, a better feeling than American jails, really. And we get surrounded by these guys. It's 12 or 13 of them. They're the prisoners. And so we give them a witness of who we are. They're looking at us like, who are these guys? They've never seen anything like it. And American. And so we give him our witness, and then one of the guys stepped forward and he says, listen, do you have any money? And so we told him the story. When we got arrested, an elderly lady had given us 100 pesos. And And the brother turns to us. He says, well, we got a corporation in here. I'm the boss. You give us 50 pesos each, and everybody shares equally. I'm the boss. So as long as you're here, you'll eat. Jacob turns to him and says, well, you're not our boss, and we're not feeling to do that. And what we found out, then this brother jumps up, Felipe, I remember his name. He says, let me show you to your room. He shows us to the drunk tank. So we're there. Jacob looks up at the guard. He's leaning up against a papaya tree, sitting on his bedroll, looks up at the guard. There was a wall around, and the guard stands on the wall. And he looks up at him and he says, I wonder who's in jail here, you or me? You know, these guards, they got to watch us every day, sharing with the people, below. And so the only way that you could get food in there is if you had family who would bring food to you, had money. And if you had money, then you could pay the sheriff's son to go and get you food. So what we did, we paid the sheriff's son, gave him an order of what we wanted, and then when it came back, including tobacco, because in those days we were smoking tobacco, we shared it with all the brothers in the jail. Now the Jefe, who was in there for murder, which we did not know at first, little by little, he's getting worked on. And they're already letting us use their stove to cook after they're done cooking. Now we already have a little kitchen building up. One of the immigration officers who fingerprinted us brought us food. Then we had a man who was the tourist guide for the American who we had met. And he brought us food. And he came and told us that it was the American who turned us into the immigration after we had told that American our story of, entering the country without going through their little border. At 30 miles in, they want to check if you have money. So he felt bad about it. He brought food to us a few times. So we had our own little kitchen being set up. And then we got called in by the American consulate. And Jacob and I had decided that we're not going to give the Mexican government any information on our American, our parents, or even our last name. Gary Christ and Jacob Christ is all they got. And so we get called. First Jacob gets called. He goes to the phone. He comes back. He tells me it's the American consulate. Then I get called to the phone. By the time I get there, the lady is freaked out. She says, we got a guy in there for 5 years. His parents have remortgaged their house and their business, made deals with the Mexican government, and they have reneged on every deal, and he's still in there, been in there for 5 years in Mazatlan. So by the time she's done, I'm a little shaken by it. I told her, well, we'll see, but right now we're not going to do anything other than what we're doing. And so I go back to where Jacob is, and we were cooking up a meal, and I'm inside thinking, it's fine being here for a little while, but I don't really want to be here forever. And then I think, the Lord will make us a way. And just as I'm having that thought, a guard looks down and he sees we didn't have any tortillas for our beans. He says, you have no tortillas for your beans. I go get you some. He goes off the roof, gets us tortillas, and drops them in my lap. And this all happens as I am thinking the Lord will make a way. It was nonstop from the time we got arrested to the time we ended up back in Arizona. Nonstop miracles. Nobody could touch us. Nobody ever hurt us. It was a journey. It was a beautiful journey. So we ended up in there, a few nights, and then one evening, because we're in the drunk tank, and on the weekends is when the drunks come in. And so We're in there, and a few drunks come in the night, and in the morning, the corporation gets around them, the jefe, and asking them for money. And when they're not giving the money right away, they start coming up with threatening them. Jacob jumps right in between. No violencia, no violence. And the jefe turns into like a little kid. Pulls Jake aside. Says, this is what we do to survive in here. Jake says, no, man, you don't got to do that. Just tell them what it is. Tell them this is how we survive if you guys will donate towards our food. And if they don't want to, let it go. So he does that to the first guy. And instead of getting 50 pesos, he gets 250. After that, we were in. The guards came to us after we were there for a while, offered to help us escape. They said they put Jesus in jail too. And we told them, no, we don't want to escape. We don't want to be chased around the country. So, American gets arrested at night, drunk. Ends up in a tank with us at night. It was pretty chilly. We had our bedrolls. We had our army blankets. We had mats. That's the only thing they gave you were these mats. And even though it was, being in Mexico, south in the jungle, it was wintertime and it was a little chilly at night. And so the brother came in and we rapped to him a little bit, and he was really receiving, but he was drunk. So we gave him some blankets and some mats, and he rolled out, and I watched him in the middle of the night when more people came in. He shared a little bit that he had. And then when he got up in the morning and we were relating with one another, he decided he is going to get us back into the United States. And he had a property in Mexico, had done time in prison in the United States. Last thing he wanted to do was tangle with the Mexican government. And yet, he felt moved. So he hooked up with the American consulate, filled up all the papers stating that he knew us from America, and he made a way for us. And they even called us in the office one time. They had us sign some papers. He made sure he would come in. He lived not where we were at. He lived outside of town. But he would come every couple days and report to us what he got done and bring food to us. It was a big giving that he did. And then just a day before we were going to get out, he came in and he said, I'm going to be here when you guys go. I got it all set up, and you guys are supposed to go tomorrow. Oh, yeah, and there was one other great story that happened there. I mean, there was lots of them, but there's one other great story. The jefe, when we would be eating our vegetables, he'd say, it's malo, it's bad. And when he'd be eating his carne, his flesh, he'd say, it's good, it's bueno, it's bueno. He would do that with everything. But one of the last nights we were there, they arrested a doctor for drunkenness. And he was in there, and in the morning, he was part of a conversation that was going on. And we were talking to him about our vegetarian diet and principles. And he said, oh, you can't live like that. You'll die. And the jefe was sitting there. And he says to the doctor, he says, man does not live by bread alone. Those were the last words we heard him speak that I can remember. Kind of knocked our socks off, because it was, of course they were already off, but it was really, a beautiful thing to see. So yeah, then that day we were going to be taken out. The brother doesn't show up. But the immigration officer who arrested us shows up. He puts us on a bus. He goes with us. And we are going in the wrong direction. And then he tells us, yeah, he's taking us to Mazatlan. We're going to the prison. And he didn't feel bad about it. So we're in the next thing we know, we're in immigration office in Mazatlan. I'm going to tell the rest of this story on the next one.